How many discounts does USAA Auto Insurance offer? Too many to say here. Multi-vehicle discount, safe driver discount, new vehicle discount, storage discount, legacy.
How many discounts will you stack up? Visit USAA.com/auto discounts. Restrictions apply.
Everyone who works at Starbucks, full or part-time, gets stock in our company. Which means that when Starbucks succeeds, our people do too. At Starbucks, benefits like company stock are just the start.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I am going to talk about the feeling that every minute counts at midlife, but how to use this sense of urgency and this epiphany to do more good than harm. You know, because a lot of people at midlife, the classic midlife crisis really does hurt a lot of people, you know, people leaving their spouse or, you know, just switching up their job without a lot of thought or just spending a lot of money. You know, those sorts of decisions are not good for everybody around you. So we will talk about moderating this feeling and how normal it really is, but also how to use it to live your best life instead of just kind of the most impulsive life that you could live. And before that, I must tell you to subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was not to be a codependent two-headed hydra with your spouse. And we have 200 more, including oral sex on women, and ones that you care about less than that one. Okay, so point being, I see a lot of people in midlife. And at midlife, I saw an analogy that it's like you throwing a ball up in the air and then it starts to come back down. Well, when it hits that apex and it kind of starts to come back down, that is the midlife crisis. You realize you're not going up anymore. You have hit what is probably the midpoint, possibly overestimated and more than the midpoint if anything happens to you medically or some accident or something, you die sooner. But either way, people usually take how long their relatives tend to live, and then that's the point in their mind that they may die is when relatives did, especially if you're a woman, your mother, if you're a man, your father. And when you realize that you are at the midpoint between birth and that number, then people start to freak out a little bit, you know, especially if they are deeper thinkers. They start to feel like, oh my God, I haven't done everything I want to do. What is my life really all about? I've been living for other people. I've been doing what I'm supposed to do instead of maybe what I want to do. I've spent all these years being anxious, wondering what people think of me, thinking that all of these externalities like the house, the car, whatever, looks, whatever markers of prestige and class are most relevant to you or success, you know, that those were what was really important. And now I realize, this person at midlife continues musing, that isn't what is really important. And, you know, I should earn, you know, I've earned my right to be happy. I've put in the years and maybe my marriage has never been fulfilling and I thought it was okay and now I don't. Maybe my career has always felt like a slog, like something that doesn't really count as a passion or a calling for me, but I thought that that's just how life goes and now I don't want to do that anymore. I want to live my best life. You know, maybe I haven't been spending as much time with my kids and I realize, you know, because what happens at midlife, if you have kids around 30, well, when you're 45, guess what happens? You know, they are in high school, you know, and you are ready to be the parent. It's kind of like tragic, you know, because that's at the point where a lot of men that I see get more time to spend with their family, but the kid doesn't want to spend time with you anymore. They're not a little kid. You know, so that's why that song, Cats in the Cradle, you know, makes men cry because the dad never has time for the son and then the son grows up and he doesn't have time for the dad. So even if, by the way, even if you have made positive choices in that domain and you have been a really involved mother or father over the years, it's still very hard to know that as you start to realize that spending time with the kids and with the family is the most important thing, that's when they're becoming teenagers and young adults and leaving the nest. And that's completely developmentally appropriate for them. But as I discussed so many times, we are wired to evolutionarily live in more extended kin networks and have littler kids around, I so rarely hear, even just over the course of my career, which has been a drop in the bucket of the sands of time, I mean, it's been like 16 years that I've been in private practice. I've just realized it was about 20 years since I saw my first client ever in graduate school. But anywho, point being, even over that relatively short amount of time, I hear so many fewer people talk about like their aunt or talk about being an aunt or an uncle. For all of this about like how the child-free young people are really living into being great aunts and uncles, that's not who I see. I don't see the child-free people frequently. So once you have your own family, hanging out with like your sister or brother's kids is so much less common than it used to be. Cousins tend to see each other, rarely. Maybe a couple times a month would be a lot, for what I hear in my practice. And people used to hang out with their cousins like all the time, like live in the same town, even the same block, next door, in the same neighborhood at least. People were much more involved and integrated in their extended family. So basically, this is to say that if, for example, you have an itch to bake with a little girl, and you were at least one generation ago, you could have baked with your sister's kid maybe, or your brother's kid, or other kids in the family, or your next door neighbor. People are not as involved with their neighbors anymore. So you could kind of scratch that itch. Now, nuclear families, so isolated and so insular that, and this is a societal shift, that if you have a 13 or 15 or 17 or 20-year-old daughter and you want to bake with a little girl, you are SOL. You can't scratch that itch. You're not going to grab some kid from the street. You got to thrown in prison, right? So there isn't always another baby coming down, in the family or getting born. People used to go to baby showers like constantly. All of these things have decreased even over, as I said, the relatively short span of my career. So my point is that midlife, if you realize that you don't think you spend as much time with your young kids, their kids aren't coming anytime soon. You can't just be a grandparent when you want to be, much to many women's chagrin, even though you're not supposed to say that anymore, even that you want grandkids, even if you do, because your kid has to self-actualize, just like everybody's got to self-actualize. Well, all this self-actualization, people don't seem happier. Either way, you can't just go back in time and spend more time with your little kids. And you realize that at midlife. You also realize you can't go back in time and have a whole different career. Yeah, you could go back to school, but you're going to be, that's hard too. It's not so easy to go back to school and learn a new thing when you're in midlife. For some people, it is, and they want to do it, and they have all the energy. And for other people, even the logistical management of driving your kid to travel soccer while you now decide to get your master's is it's like unconscionable. It's like you can't even think about it, And at some point, you do have to pick a lane. So even if you go back to school for one thing, you can't go back to school for all the things. And a lot of my clients mention feeling this bittersweet feeling on college tours with their kids. It's like thinking my God, I didn't really maximize or optimize my time in college. What did I do? I drank, and I passed my classes. And what should I have done? Geez, look at all these opportunities. I remember there were things like this, even not as many, but there were still opportunities, travel abroad and study abroad and different labs and different majors and minors and concentrations and all these things, and then you go back and you think, well, I missed out on that. You really can't go home again. So the midlife crisis is thinking I can't go home again in a large sense. And so I can't redo any of these things. But what can I redo? How can I move forward in a way that feels more real and authentic and fulfilling? So, of course, career is one that many people, I even have a whole podcast, Midlife Career Change and the Meaning of Life or something. And I'll link that one in the new cool thing that Spotify lets us do where we can, link to specific podcasts instead of just mentioning them and spelling them out for you like I used to do. And then there's also, of course, the marriage, people, if they did not have a loving marriage, if you've been fighting all these years, tense, cold, there's no physical or sexual intimacy for years, at midlife, you start to realize it's probably not going to get any better with this person. I've been trying, and it hasn't. And the preoccupied attachment partner of either gender, I specifically had a podcast about the preoccupied attachment women and how at midlife, their estrogen drops and with it does their desire to chase after an emotionally unavailable husband. They're just like, fuck you. You don't want to hang out all these years, so what the hell do I care now? And a lot of men feel that way about their sexless or low, and they're always very sexless with low affection, marriage with their avoidant wife. They're like, you know what? You can't get blood from a stone. And so I want to move on. And I feel like at this stage, I have more confidence and I have kind of a greater understanding of the world, myself. Often therapy, guys go into therapy and they're like, wow, I really understand myself for the first time. Maybe I won't make the same mistakes again as I did in the first marriage, And then they want to go. They want to see who they could get if that's a more compatible person that makes them feel in their limited time on the planet that they did find the love of their life, And this is a really common thing that I hear in therapy. And so that was a big lead-in to say, you can't make these decisions impulsively, though. Because that's what makes you have a laughable midlife crisis. Because there's so many times people just, dicking around on Facebook and then they see their ex or something and then they're like, oh, the life that could have been, like, oh, I'm going to text that woman. I'm sure she still gives head at the rate that she used to. Yeah, right. And she does in the honeymoon stage. But the point is like, then they'll like leave like real quick for that person. Or somebody will just say, fuck this, I've had it at work, and they'll quit. And it's not everybody that does this. It's more like a midlife crisis coupled with an underlying predisposition toward impulsivity and depression. So usually people with both ADHD and depression, they're the ones who like really go to town with the midlife crisis. And their kids hate them after. And things can be repaired. But point is, everybody's mad. They blow up their relationships, their career. They start like going out and partying, using drugs again, things like that, like party drugs. This is not a good scene. If you find yourself in constant anger during your midlife crisis, that's when you got to get into therapy. Sorrow, anger, a feeling of nostalgia, wistfulness, kind of the desire to think deeply and plan how you want to change your life. That shit is very healthy, right? But when you find yourself saying, I'm just done, it's just over, I'm just done, I just hit my point. No. That's when you really need to get into therapy, talk to somebody. Because I've seen people make grievous errors when they feel that combination of impulsivity and that fuck it feeling, that usually means irritability related to depression. And by the way, both men and women have hormonal changes at midlife, and both of them can lead to depression, dropping estrogen, lower testosterone, etc. And these are biological markers. And these are juxtaposed against the entire societal shift that I've told you about, where people are no longer firmly and safely embedded within large family units. So basically, the only person who ever tells you what to do is your spouse. So then it's really easy. It used to be like the pastor would tell you what to do. Your own father would tell you what to do. The neighbors, your uncle, Jesus, a whole neighborhood. There were norms. You had to fit in like a Russian nesting doll. You had to fit into like one culture and inside another culture, and every one of them had norms. So it was harder to go like just completely batshit and derail. But now it's like the only person who ever tells anybody what to do is maybe their boss, and that's via email, and their spouse. So then it's easy to blame everything on the spouse because you're like, oh, that motherfucker telling me what to do. Well, yeah, like everybody needs something from somebody they're in a relationship with, but we have fewer relationships now. So really the only one who kind of ever gets up your ass about anything in today's day and age is your spouse, which I should probably do a podcast on if I if I feel so moved to do so. But either way, if this really resonates with you and you're like, I just want to blow it all up and start something new, and you know what, people tell me that isn't a good financial decision, or nobody would think that it's a good decision, but you know what, it's my truth. You calm your truth down, slow your roll with your truth, and get into therapy, and then you can think about all the positives and negatives of the choices that you want to make, and make a more reasoned and mindful and intentional decision that is not just based on where your current mood is. Just like I tell women, don't divorce your husband. Don't file paperwork when you're the week before your period. Of course you want to divorce him. Why don't you wait till, 2 weeks? See how good he looks then. He may look a lot better. And so it's the same kind of thing with a midlife crisis. It's a hormonal, psychological shift. Do not let it steer you into impulsive decisions. Like, don't just leave your marriage. Think about your marriage. Go to therapy and think about your contribution to your marriage. How have you changed? And then how has that stressed your marriage? Get into couples therapy, right? Do something. Read a damn book. But do not just say, fuck it, basically God spoke to me, or my God, ChatGPT. I should do a whole podcast on that one, and that one I will for sure do. People asking ChatGPT, about how healthy their relationship is. ChatGPT's wired to be sycophantic, It's going to tell you you're right. Also, it's not its fault, even if it was a person, because you're only saying what you think and what you know. So people say their side, and ChatGPT takes that as a fact. People will be like, oh, I set up ChatGPT to really, be hard on me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, what did it say? They're like, people like you are very intense. They're so smart that they're smarter than the average, and that's what leads to their problems. I'm like, Jesus Christ. You're too nice. That's what ChatGPT tells people. Anyway, point being, I'll save that for another podcast. Don't make any impulsive midlife decisions. Midlife is super common to reevaluate your life. That's healthy. If you stayed the same, that would not be healthy. You're supposed to grow and change. Priorities are supposed to shift. I talk about this frequently. You go frequently from a feeling of that your relationship and your family is a priority to you want to see what your legacy is going to be, your impact on the world. You're greater than just packing your kids' snacks, but yet you miss packing your kids' snacks. It's kind of a bittersweet time. But this is the best possible time to get into deeper insight-oriented therapy or couples therapy, if it's your midlife crisis, it should be your therapy, with couples therapy being secondary. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm sure it's relevant to a lot of you, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day. Bye, guys.